culture to me, it's not a buzzword. Like it is what you are. It's your brand. It's everything. Like it's a living, breathing thing. And in order to actually have a very strong, positive culture, like it should honestly be your top priority.
I want to welcome you to my sales podcast, where we have one focus and one focus only. That is helping you, the sales community, and sales leaders create more conversations with more qualified buyers, ultimately leading to improving your sales productivity and closing more deals. Each show, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you find, engage, and connect with more buyers. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., and you're now listening to the Selling with Social Sales Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the AAISP Annual Leadership Summit, where the sales community comes together to learn, share, and network. Join us this April 16th through the 18th in Chicago. Visit www.aa-isp.org and click Leadership Summit 2019. And to save 30% off your registration, use the code Vengreso 30%. Mr. Justin Hiatt, Vice President of Digital Sales with Workfront. Welcome to Selling with Social, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Mario. I appreciate it.
Oh, bro, I'm excited to have you on this show, especially because you guys were a client of ours. And one of the things that attracted me to bringing you on to the Selling with Social podcast was really the really awesome things that you're doing with your digital sales team, formerly account development team. And it's unique. And I think a lot of the sales leaders who are listening in, BDRs, SDRs, digital sales folks, even field sales folks who are also listening, will get some value out of this. So we'll get into some of the meats and potatoes, but I told everybody here, the Vice President of Digital Sales for Workfront. That's what everybody knows that you do today. But do me a favor, bro. Give us a little background about yourself. Tell us who you are. Were you born and raised in sales, or did you start out somewhere else? Or give us a little background about yourself.
I'll go through my sales story. I think through some family, not so much pressure, but advice, I found my calling, fortunately. But I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Big time hockey player, played all through high school and some through college. Love my roots in Minnesota. So I'm a Minnesotan at heart, cheer for all the sports teams. I had an opportunity to move out to Boston, so I'm kind of a second generation Bostonian through my experience and time at Oracle to build out an organization there. So I spent about 7 years in Boston working for both Oracle and HubSpot, and then found my way to Utah with an opportunity here with Workfront. So pumped to be here in Utah, but definitely have roots and back home in Minneapolis and Boston. My sales story is really simple. I went to college thinking I was going to become an attorney. I watched all the attorney movies and thought it was so glamorous, which is kind of silly when you think about it. But junior year, decided that another 3 years of college or school did not sound that amazing. So I started to think about what I wanted to do in the workforce. And honestly, I had absolutely no idea. And I credit my mother. She said, look, like, what do you think you're good at? And, what kind of attributes do you have? And what type of work do you think you can do? And I'm like, well, I'm a lot like my uncle, who's a very successful salesperson. She's like, you should do that. Like, I think you could do great. And he's built such an awesome life for himself through that position or career. So I started kind of in the banking side of sales. And after I think like a few months, I was number one in the bank in terms of sales. I'm like, man, I'm pretty good at this. And I haven't looked back. And at one point, I obviously made the transition from financial services and banking to technology. So that's kind of my quick story.
And I love your background, right? All in technology from Oracle to HubSpot. You were over there at InsideSales.com and now for the last year, almost a half, right? At Workfront, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so technology sales is not foreign to you by any stretch of the imagination. So that's awesome. Interesting story that you talk about the law school path. So I thought too, oh, lawyer, this is where I'm going. So I started on the pre-law program. And then I decided to take stats 101 at UC Berkeley. And there was about almost 500 kids in the program. And that was a requirement for pre-law.
Yep.
And I quickly realized that I was never going to get into the Bolt School of Law, or not Bolt, Haas School of Law without passing stats. So I couldn't make it happen.
Yeah, I was like full-fledged pre-law. I took Latin my freshman year, had never taken a lick of Latin. I remember studying, like to this day, studying for the final for literally like 14 straight hours. Not that I didn't know it. Like I had to study that much, and I still only got a B on the final. And that was the last Latin I've ever done.
Hey, at least you got the B, man. At least you got the B.
Yeah, I got a B, but I worked for it. I earned it. I definitely earned it.
So truth be told, I think this is the first time that I'll ever tell this story. The professor I had for Stats 101 his name was Professor Pervs. And I thought that I was smart and that this was pretty easy. And so like the first 4 weeks of class, I blew off class. And finally, when I started doing the homework and realizing that I didn't get it, I started going to class. And by the point that I realized that I couldn't pass it, it was too late to drop the class. So I came up with this plan. And this is how I knew that, sales was in my bloodline. I came up with this plan. And this is totally horrible. I'm telling this story live on my show here. But the plan was, I'm going to appeal to the man's heart. And I'm going to go to every single office hour that he had and try to learn this stuff one-on-one private through private tutoring and coaching, and hope that he would pass me in the course. So this is the true story. So there's 500 students in the class. There was 10 GSIs inside that class. And I went to every single one of his office hours twice a week, was there the entire time from the time the door opened to the time the door closed. And I swear to God, I just could not, my brain just doesn't think the way Stats thinks, right? I just could not do it. So I go and take the final. I'm going into the final with a D. On the final, I just bomb the final. I can't get it. I get an F. So my GSI calls me up and he says, Mario, I've got good news and I've got bad news, right? Because he's giving us our grades. The year has ended. What do you want first? And I said, give me the bad news. The bad news is you failed the final, which means that you actually got an F. And that was with the curve. And I said, okay, what's the good news? And he says, the good news is, I don't know how you know Professor Pervs, but out of 500 students, when we all sat around the table, Professor Pervs says, who has Mario Martinez as a student? And he goes, I do. And he said, how did he do on the final? And he said, he got an F with the curve. And so he says, here's what I want you to do. Give him a C- and let him move on.
Nice.
And I got a C- and I moved on. I couldn't believe it myself. That's how I knew it. I was like, the plan worked perfectly. I don't know if he'll ever listen to this podcast. I don't even know if he's alive still, but there was a plan behind that. So I was working the system, man. I was working the system. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it.
All right. Well, listen, one of the things that I loved when working with you and your team was the fact that I was clearly able to observe with the students that we worked with when we were training your team through our Selling with Videos training program, that you built a pretty amazing culture. And I got to tell you, man, there are a lot of salespeople that we talk to and that leaders that I talk to, about 200 executive meetings a year that I do. Mm-hmm. And I can't say the same is true for most of the leaders that I work for. I mean, there's a lot of folks in the organization that just culturally speaking, they're just not satisfied. And hats off to you for helping your salespeople get to a peak point in their career of moving them on and growing them. But you built an amazing culture. And that's one of the reasons why I actually wanted to have you on this podcast. And before I want to go into talking about leading through culture, which is, I think, one of your cardinal attributes, it's something that you've done a really amazing job at over there at Workfront in your previous careers. Before I do that, I want you to tell us one thing that nobody would know about you by looking at your social profiles. And I want something juicy, man.
You know, I'll do a visual since we're on video and they just see my face, but I have tattoos. As you can see, I have a sleeve here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just a huge fan of them. My wife's a huge fan of them too. I'm not very artistic. So I think at some point I found this as a mechanism to show my thoughts are feelings about stuff. And they have like not crazy special meaning, but they do have meaning to me. I've gotten a tattoo everywhere I've lived, and they've kind of happened at certain parts of my life. But that would be one thing that people don't know about me, just looking at my LinkedIn profile, for example.
Now, do you generally, as a result, I mean, obviously you're the vice president of digital sales for Workfront. Clearly I don't know if you talked about tattoos when you were getting interviewed, but is that something that you think prevents salespeople from moving up and around or getting jobs, is getting tattoos and having that be visible, that people could see that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually have gotten that a lot from people that work for me because they're younger and they're thinking about getting them. I will say right now, this day and age, they're so much more accepted than they've ever been. I don't hide them, but if we have, a big customer event like our conference, I don't show them there. I button it up and wear nice business casual clothes, maybe even a suit. So I don't know. I guess I'm smart about, showing them, but they are a part of me. So I'm not going to hide them. I clearly got them on an area of my body that I don't always cover up, for a reason. So, but yeah, I think today they're definitely much more accepted, not to say, especially in the technology industry. And I think, I don't know what the stat is, but I bet most, younger people that are coming into the industry or just into the workforce in general, I bet more have tattoos than maybe don't. Like, it's kind of part of that culture. And it's not to say I've never been discriminated, but I don't ever think it's ever held me back. At least at the places that, I've worked, and I've never felt discriminated against or, been passed up for a project or an opportunity or anything like that to my knowledge. So
I think the part that, someone may get caught with their pants down, if you would, is if it's visible during the interview process.
Yeah.
And especially if you're customer facing, right?
Yep. I think they just need to be somewhere where you can cover them up if you want to. I wouldn't be comfortable with a neck tattoo, for example.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I think as long as you can control, when people see them or when they don't, or you don't feel like they're going to cause you any disruption in terms of you advancing your career or getting an opportunity or anything like that. Today, I just don't think it's a stopper for most. But, I'm in an industry where it is more accepted. It just is. So, there are probably some other industries some of your listeners might be in where like, heck, I would never do that. It wouldn't be accepted. So I'm kind of just speaking to my own experience.
Yeah, it's a great point. And that actually goes into when I was there with your team, and we worked with your team for quite a while, for several months. And one thing I observed, which is a great thing for you, right, is that your team truly wanted to make the leader happy. Like, they really worked hard to make the leader happy. So hats off to you for creating that type. What's that?
I appreciate all that. I really appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's visible, right? Like, when people want to work for you and they want to make you happy, it's a great thing to be able to see that. But talk to me a little bit about some of the tips on creating a culture that people want to come and work. They want to work hard. They want to overperform. And by the way, your team is doing a great job, as I understand it, and it's performing quite well. So how do you lead through culture? What are some of your tips that other sales leaders or aspiring sales folks who want to be in leadership should be thinking about?
That's obviously a big question, and I could probably go on for an hour straight on it. I'll make a comment based on what you just said in terms of them wanting to make the leader happy. I think they feel that way, and I believe they feel that way because I feel the same exact way. Not only do I want to make them happy, but I'm completely invested in their success in this role, and I'm invested in them advancing their career. I can sit someone down their first day and look them dead in the eye saying, I and my leadership team and the rest of the people here are going to create an environment that will make you successful, or where you can be utterly successful. And our job is to do that. And then the investment back is we expect you to work really, really hard, work with a positive attitude, be a great team player, and carry your number, like perform. Like, that is the expectation. And I think having that like mutual respect and accountability and agreement, whatever you want to call it, is really where it all starts. And I kind of view it as a relationship. And I think because of that, people think they can approach me. They can definitely approach the rest of my leadership staff here at Workfront. And like, we just have this natural agreement that starts from day one, because that's just kind of the expectation we set. So it really just starts with that. And I'm not trying to make it sound that simple, but I do think I've worked with some other organizations, or even been in some where that's just not the case. And, when you don't have that, it's already broken down.
Recently, you changed your organization's name from account development to digital sales.
Yeah.
the reason why I'm talking about this is because I think it has to do a lot with the culture that you're building within your organization. I think you've got 70, 80 plus digital sales reps. Is that right?
Yep, about 70 globally.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about why the name change from account development, which is oftentimes called BDRs or SDRs, or sometimes even inside sales, right, to digital sales. Talk to me about the mindset shift that you've done to make that change. And then how does that impact the cultural view of the sales reps and what they're doing or what their expectations are?
I instilled this opportunity because when I took over, it was called account development. The biggest problem I honestly had with them, if I'm being blunt, is like people didn't know what that meant. So I'd have to explain, and my reps would have to explain what it actually is they did. And it's like, that's just a waste of time. And it kind of bugged me. So, we got together as a group. I kind of instilled saying, hey guys, I have this culture group, focus group that is just focused on our culture. We meet every week. And it's like, look guys, I think, we have an opportunity to rebrand our organization, and we have an opportunity to rebrand what we're called. What do you think we should be called? And it started with the basic stuff. It's like, well, most are called sales development or business development. We call our partner in group here business development, so that couldn't be it. So I started challenging them, like, what is it you actually do, both internally and externally? What do you want to be branded? What do you want to be known for? And the digital thing came up kind of as like, are we digital work consultants? Because Workfront's whole platform is based on you being able to manage any type of work, structured, unstructured, digital, across your enterprise, anywhere, right? So when digital came up, I'm like, well, what about digital sales? And, honestly, like, it is a new term, and I know you're very familiar with it. You probably helped pioneer it. But we researched it a bit, and we're like, that's what we do, right? We're a sales organization. We don't directly sell things, but we're part of the sales organization. We roll up under the sales organization. Digital sales is about using current means of reach prospecting, but also the new cutting edge things like video and social. And we do those things. We want to be on the forefront of the effort in the mediums that are being used just to be relevant. So, after reviewing all of that and thinking through, does DSR make sense? And does digital sales rep make sense to us both internally and externally? We just felt it was the right fit. And we actually did. It's a big change. And, we proposed it up to my boss. We even talked to our CEO. They're like, man, we love it. It sounds great. It is what you guys do. And it also really aligns well to all work being digital, which Workfront obviously helps people with. So that's what we settled on. I actually planned to do it Jan 1 as we flipped into the new year, but people were so excited about it. Once we kind of figured it out, we just made the change in Q4, and here we are.
You said something that I think I want to go back to, that as leaders are listening in, and it was on the topic of creating a focus group on culture. Mm-hmm. And you guys meet weekly. Now, I just recorded the podcast in the last couple of weeks and published a podcast from Dan Walshman, who is the managing director of Walshman Partners and Edgy Inc. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that we talked about was building a culture of awesomeness, right? And I would argue that leaders who are listening in, especially as I sit here and listen right now, I don't even have a focus group on company culture. Now, we're relatively small, right? Less than 30 folks. So do we need that? I would say yes, absolutely. Like, have people help us understand what type of environment we're creating and be part of creating a new environment or whatever that might be. But go back to this focus group on culture. How big is it? Did you say you meet once a week?
We meet once a week. Yeah. If there's something big that we're working on, we might pull in even more than that. But every Monday morning we meet. We have different things that we work on all the time. Obviously, the rebranding of our organization was a project we did and completed. If I go back, like, culture to me, it's not a buzzword. Like, it is what you are. It's your brand. It's everything. Like, it's a living, breathing thing. And in order to actually have a very strong, positive culture, like, it should honestly be your top priority. I can't develop a culture on my own. The culture of the Workfront digital sales organization is built by the people. So, I created this group to bring them in to make sure that, one, we were, aligning and abiding by the company's cultural values, which are extremely strong. And that's where it really starts. And then from there, what do we want to be known for, and what type of culture, do we want to have? And it's really simple. We want to be a culture that's high performing, makes a really big positive impact on the business. And it's a place where people are happy. They have friends, they have fun, they make good money, and they can advance their career. And that's really kind of our charter, if you will. And that's what we really, really focus on. So it's everything from big, initiatives like the rebranding of our organization to, hey, how do we keep energy on the floor before Thanksgiving? It's a huge spectrum of things that we focus on. And the goal is to keep the culture happiness level and our ENPS score high. And ironically, I just, put out the happiness score today, which I tend to do like every 3 months, just to make sure like people are still generally happy here. And we usually score quite high on that. So you have to be thinking about it all the time. It's a massive time investment. Involving everyone you can in it can only help, because at the end of the day, it's not a VP like me building the culture. It's really the people. And I'm a servant to them. I'm making sure that I'm helping them build what they want to build. And
you're a facilitator of this culture that they want, right?
Yep.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, there's a high number of millennials that are inside of your digital sales team, right?
I'd say with the exception of me and 2 or 3 of my managers or senior leaders, it's all millennials for the most part. And it's very, very high millennial, like 95% plus for giving everybody. Yeah.
Okay. And you said there was 4 things on the goals of the culture that you've built around your digital sales organization, which is a pretty healthy size one. High performing, make friends, have fun, advance their career. And did you say money, or was that under high performance?
No, so there was make some good money too. And then probably one I maybe forgot is, build a strong skill set.
Which I think comes as a result of advancing your career, right? Mm-hmm. It is what leads to the advancement in your career. You can't get advancement without actually developing your skill set.
Exactly.
So interesting you talk about this, because we oftentimes hear the conversations around, how to manage millennials, or millennials are this, or millennials are not loyal. Millennials want everything instant gratification. And then we also, hear about, millennials are not incentivized through money, that they actually want a great cultural experience. They would rather create a sense of loyalty and have fun and make enough money, but friends. And so what you've defined is actually by the group's leaders that you've selected. Did the group select these individuals to be on the committee, or did you select it as a result of their performance?
No, it's totally volunteer-based. So culture isn't the only group I have. I have groups around our enablement and our training and our learning. I have a group around our go-to-market strategy, mainly prospecting strategy, account-based strategy, things like that. I also have a group around talent. So it's hiring, it's talent retention. And here and there, like if we're in the middle of like tech season and evaluating technology, we'll pull that group together. They're not always meeting. So we're not always evaluating technology. But yeah, those are like my 5 pillars of culture, if you will, and the areas that I really focus on to do all the things that you just said.
Wait, so one more time: enablement, talent, prospecting, and what was the other ones?
So it's actually strategy, talent, enablement, culture, and technology are kind of my 5 groups. Those are like the 5 pillars to my business that I stand by.
Wow. And I assume that individuals who are on these focus groups for you, that they're not on multiple, or could they be on multiples?
Yeah, here and there, someone will, just because they have a great idea or they want to. I try to limit it to 1 per, just so I'm not taking them away from what they're trying to do every day. It's not a massive time commitment. And the investment they make in it, in theory, should engage them to do better when they're on the floor. But it's volunteer-based. Like, they self-select themselves for these groups. I don't say no to start. And there's a simple ask. It's like, when we meet, you're there and you're participating. Like, that's it. They've all done really well. And then, like, as people get promoted, we try to go and lobby new people to join. Like, people that are brand new join, because sometimes they have the best ideas because they haven't been in the environment yet to be swayed one way or another. So that's kind of how it works. And then every month we update people on what we're working on. We just did it today. So we just hop on a Zoom, and each group presents for about 5 minutes just to give transparency into what they're working on and what the group or the organization should expect coming from them and when, and then we move on.
Wow. Correct me if I'm wrong, you're meeting with all these different focus groups approximately once a week. And is it 30-minute or hour-long meetings?
Some are 30, some are an hour. It's up to the group. Our strategy group takes a good hour because we have a phenomenal prospecting sequence and cadence strategy,
which I'm very familiar with, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. They're always iterating. It's So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, but man, they bust out tons of great messaging and content in a short amount of time, but they need an hour a week, and here and there, they'll meet even more than that. But some only take 30 minutes. It just really depends. But these are not manager led. I do hop in and facilitate and direct sometimes if they need it, or just to check in, and as the other managers do too. But at the end of the day, these are completely run by the DSRs, pretty much solely run by them.
That's fantastic. And I love this conversation we just had about leading through culture. Like, for those of you that are listening in, of course, Justin is a practitioner, right? So we're not talking about a sales thought leader, influencer. Actually, I take that back. You are a thought leader as a result of being a practitioner, but we're not talking about an influencer. We're talking about a book author of any sort. This is grassroots, in the field. How do you build a large, scalable account development, formerly known as account development, BDR, SDR, digital sales organization, and actually retain this talent and move them along? And that's the other thing that I just want to touch on, Justin, that what I've observed and what I've seen and what I've heard from your people as we've trained them was all around the ability to take the skill sets and move it to the next level. Like, they're constantly looking for the next level, whether that's a year or 2 year long stint. There's an expectation that they're probably in their role for no more than a couple of years. Is that right?
Even less than that. I mean, my goal is to probably have a 12 to 18 month tenure in role before they're promoted. It depends, right? It depends on obviously the growth of your company. In my case, it's the growth of Workfront. There needs to be positions for people to move into, but I believe that they can develop the right amount of skill set to step into an account executive or potentially even digital sales leadership role in that amount of time. That obviously starts with really hiring the right people that will ramp fast and learn fast and have just a learning mentality or DNA to them. But yeah, I mean, that is pretty much the crux of it.
So you said something that is, I think, a very key point here, which is hiring the right people with what I would call a churn rate. And you're not churning people out of the organization. You're moving them into another position or other positions within the company. You've got to really be cranking on developing your bench strength, hiring the right people with the right mindset that fit into the culture that you're trying to create there. And one of my biggest problems that I had as a leader is finding the right talent, especially in a competitive marketplace where technology, like where you're at in Salt Lake City, there's a bazillion technology companies similar to where we're at in Silicon Valley here. So what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about how do you hire the right people? What are the things that you're doing to make those decisions and make it work so you've got a strong culture? But before we do that, we're going to listen to this message from our program sponsor. Vengreso will once again be joining the AAISP and hundreds of sales leaders in Chicago for the 11th annual AAISP Leadership Summit. And we want you to be there with us. Sales leaders from around the globe will come together for a learning experience unlike any other. Attendees will find pre-event workshops, large and small group learning, a technology expo, as well as the annual Inside Sales Awards Gala. Join us in Chicago on April 16th through the 18th. And for all of our listeners, visit www.aa-isp.org. Go to the Leadership Summit 2019, and to save 30% off your registration, use the code Vengreso 30%. That's Vengreso 30%. Right before that message, we were talking about hiring the right people. Give me the secret to your success with a 12 to 18 month long stint inside of the digital sales organization, a group of 70 plus people that you've got. That equals a high number of people that you're constantly onboarding and adding to the team. How do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. It's a strategy. I mean, having a strategic plan around recruiting. So where are you finding this talent? Having a sound strategy around your ideal candidate profile. From there, a really good interview process so you can make the right decisions on who you're bringing on board. And then from there, there's even a bigger element to it, and it's retention. Like to your point, I want to turn people in Workfront into other positions positively, but I don't want to lose them, right? So, I actually look at retention as just negative attrition. So what percent of people am I keeping any given year? And I have a goal of like 95%. It's really ambitious. I'm usually not there, but I am usually above 90. But yeah, like our goal is to bring people on and get them promoted. And we have a long track record of that. So to your point, like the battle starts in the recruiting lines, and there are so many great companies here. Usually when I don't land a candidate, I can't tell them they're making a mistake. Like they're going to another really, really good company. But, I know I'm competing. So it really starts, and it depends on how competitive your marketplace is, but it really starts with building your brand out in the marketplace. The two places I go, because I hire, lightly experienced people or people right out of universities. Obviously, I go to local university and colleges. That's number one. And two, I go to certain industries to where I feel they may want to change industries. I'm biased. I think tech is the best place to be a salesperson. A lot of people do. And so I go to certain industries where they might, have some sales experience, but want to get into the tech industry. And I feel, an SDR or digital sales role is the best place to get started. So those are really the two places I go. On the university level, it's more than just showing up to a job fair. Like we are heavily invested in each of the big schools here in Utah, to the point where we sponsor, we attend, sales events for their sales clubs. We attend marketing events for their marketing clubs and organizations. We go down and we teach classes. We do Kaizen type events with them. I mean, you name it, we'll get involved as we can. And that's all about just creating a brand and creating a relationship with the school, and then, the administrators and the teachers of, sales and marketing, and then ultimately the student body. That takes a lot of work. We've been continually working on this. And our goal is to have people talking about Workfront as one of the top places for them to want to go if they want to be in sales or marketing or anything. And, we're really making some progress there. We've built that type of brand here in the Valley. But, the moment we stop doing that, someone else will flank us. So it's just a continual effort on the university front. You really need a good, strong candidate profile to be comfortable hiring people with no experience out of school. But, I've been doing it since my Oracle days. So we found phenomenal people that candidly surprise me every day on how great they are. Like I was nowhere near them at that age, so we're not afraid to do that. But, we also have our doors open for people that, want to change jobs and, makes sense to come to Workfront and get into the tech industry.
Wow. Did I hear your number correctly that you said you have a 90% retention rate?
Yeah. This year I've carried over 90% retention.
Wow. Congratulations. That's like, I don't know, maybe it's me, unheard of.
No, it happens. It doesn't happen automatically. There's a lot that goes into it. I mean, it starts with the culture. Like the adage says, people either leave their boss or leave their company or both, usually leave their boss. So I just know in creating a culture that people can learn in advance, why would they leave Workfront and go be a DSR or an SDR elsewhere? They won't. And if there's not an opportunity for them here, given timing doesn't work out, but we've helped them develop the skill to go be a rep somewhere else, I'm okay with that. I'm honestly okay with that. I know they're going to want to stay here, but timing doesn't always work out. And some people just feel like it's the right time to make that move. I'm okay with that. And that's I want people to go through the progression, the process of developing the right skill to be great salespeople. Because if they're great salespeople, then the stereotype of sales gets better and more positive, and I'm okay with that. I feel like that's kind of my job. And I got that mentality from my former employer, HubSpot. There's so many phenomenal alumni of that company that are doing amazing things. They own companies. They're in leadership positions elsewhere. And you should be okay with that. And I think because if you have that attitude, actually more people will want to stay working for you because you're so genuine and transparent with it. And that's just the attitude I've gotten from having worked in that environment. It just is now a part of me.
And to that end, I've got a great story that comes to mind, and that was when I moved over to be the vice president of sales at a software collaboration company. I was in telecom, and I moved over to a collaboration company in SaaS, right? Mm-hmm. And so there was one of the top reps in the mid-market space. He wanted to move to work for a software company. He no longer wanted to be in telecom, but he couldn't cross over. Salesforce wouldn't hire him. LinkedIn wouldn't hire him because he was in, quote, telecom. And I just think that's one of the stupidest things in the world for people to pass up great talent just because you're not in the industry. Are you freaking kidding me? If you're not in the industry, that's even better because you're not tainted by what you think is right. I mean, you can totally groom those people, especially if they're great. Nonetheless, I fundamentally disagree with the methodologies of talent recruitment for some of these technology companies. That having been said, he came to me and he said, I'm number one in the country. I'm number one in the region, but I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in telecom. I want to be in software and I can't get into that. Could you help me? And so I said, absolutely. I'll bring you on board. I brought him on board to the organization, and it was funny because it was with the company that I used to work at, and the manager that he reported to a couple layers up was obviously a friend of mine and a former manager of mine. Boy, I got to tell you, they were pissed. They were pissed off because we took their guy. But here's the thing. We didn't take him. The guy left. And why did he leave? Because they, as a leadership team, were not helping him get to where he wanted to go. And where he wanted to go was having a home inside of software and selling in the software technology space to make more money. Now, this was the key, Justin. The key was when I told him to come on board, I said, you give me 18 to 24 months, and I'll help you personally get into Salesforce or LinkedIn or wherever it might be. Like, I'll train you and help you, but you give me that time back. And by the way, if in fact, before your 18 months is up, you get an opportunity to go land in one of these companies, you let me know and I will help you anyways, right? As long as you're doing the right thing. And here's what happened. About 14 months later in the organization, he got a phone call from Salesforce, and Salesforce started talking to him about, coming over to work as a small business account rep. It was actually a step down, but where he wanted to be. He really wanted to work for Salesforce. And so he walked into my office, said, can I talk to you for a second? I said, yeah, sure. He closed the door. I was like, oh, geez. And so he says, it's kind of weird. It's kind of funny, but I got this opportunity and it's at Salesforce, and they started calling me, and I'm going into the next round. And he's like, I know you told me, and I'm really sorry. I wasn't sure, but I thought, look, you've been loyal to me. I want to be loyal to you, and I want to tell you what's going on. And I looked at him and I said, freaking fantastic. What can I do to help? Right? Because this is what we do as leaders. We need to understand where they want to go and help them get there, even if it doesn't meet the exact timeline that we were hoping for, right? But ultimately it comes back in spades, right? And to have seen how the other leadership team reacted, they were upset, right? Upset to the point that they issued a letter to me in an attempt to cease and desist from hiring any of their people.
Yeah.
Really? But I go back to this, and it's like, you lost this person, even though you countered it and offered more money. He went to this other opportunity because you didn't understand where they wanted to be, what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I think that's a missing element from leaders, is really understanding what do you want to be when you grow up and helping them get there. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And there's an element of being really genuine about it that actually makes people more loyal to you.
Absolutely.
I feel my group is extremely loyal to myself, the company, my team, because we're loyal and we're genuine back. And that's what it's all about. I'm fortunate because I feel like I'm going to lose them anyway. Like, they're either going to get promoted at Workfront or they're going to leave. But why not? Why not? So I have that benefit, if you will. It's all about just being genuine and being invested in what they want to do and where they want to go. But yeah, if you're that way, it's going to be harder and harder and harder for them to ever leave your company, even as they advance in the company. So that's just kind of my purview on it. I agree with you there.
And by the way, the rep that I mentioned that went over to Salesforce took a demotion, right? He had to start out in the super small business play, which I would like to kick Salesforce right in the what for just the way they think. Anyways, turns out he ended up being the number one rep in his region, on his team. He's now been promoted 3 times in through Salesforce, and that's only been over the last 3 years, right? Excellent. Or 3.5 years. So they get to where they want to get to, and they're going to do it with or without you. Yeah. I'd rather do it with them, because the reality is you're in that position, they leave and they know somebody who's looking for the next great gig. Guess who they're going to refer them over to? You know what I mean? it's going to come right back to you because they believe in the culture and the spirit and what you're building. And I think leaders just need to take a moment, and especially whether it's millennial or not, and they need to ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then how can I help you get there?
Yep, be invested. I'm a firm believer in karma in terms of like it'll come back to you in a positive way if you treat people that way. I'll tell you a quick story. When I had this opportunity at Workfront, I felt great about it, but I was making sure that I kept all my options open and I was exploring things. And there was a small part of me, there's always been a small part of me, and there always will be unless I do it, that wants to go be a field rep at an enterprise tech company just like your person, because I know I could do it, but I need that affirmation that I can go be a phenomenal rep out there. I was a good inside rep. I've never been out in the field. So I looked at Salesforce and Microsoft. Guess who I called? I called two guys who worked for me at Oracle who are now in the field at Salesforce and Microsoft. I can now network with people that, I initially hired in Oracle back in 2005 who are crazy successful and ask for favors too. So, your network's your net worth, and you continue to build it as you continue to help people get promoted throughout their career. And man, I love my network and I can rely on it until the day I die. And it has to do with the way I treated people and everything I've talked about.
Well, listen, make no mistakes about it. The reason why, and you know this, I told you this a number of times, and for all of you listening in, look, Workfront, yes, are they a client of Vengreso? Absolutely. But the reason why I wanted Justin, not every one of our clients gets onto my podcast, right? So the reason why I asked you, Justin, was because of what I was able to observe just by being involved with your people and the way you engage with them. When there was a problem, you're like, let's bring it to the team. I want to understand why it's not working. I want to understand what they're expecting out of it. I want to understand what they want. And more importantly, I want their commitment they're going to give back to us if we're investing back in them. And that common language that you were speaking almost every single time throughout our program was impressive. And you truly have been leading through culture, with culture, and the results speak for themselves. And the fact that I was able to observe and sense the loyalty that was built up. And I think you're doing it right, man. So hats off to you. Kudos to you and to your success that you've got there in the organization. Love the idea, as you know, that you moved from account development to a digital sales organization.
You're the biggest fan.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And we just appreciate your insights and working with the Vengreso team. And thank you for being one of our customers.
Yeah, no, it's been my pleasure. A lot of pretty much almost everything I do, I learn from other people. I've been fortunate to work for great people and work at great companies and in great organizations. And, I'm hoping my people one day will be on a podcast like this saying the same thing. And I hope people took a little something off of what I could give in terms of advice and do the same thing. It's karma. I just hope everyone can run great cultures and have great cultures, because man, it makes your job a heck of a lot easier if you're in my position, if you have one.
That's for darn sure. Well, listen, if someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way? Are you on Twitter? Are you on LinkedIn? Should they reach out to you? What should they do?
I'm just basically on LinkedIn. I've just become such a fan of where it's gone, and I live on LinkedIn. So you can connect with me. I love connecting with people. I love hearing from people. If you have questions, just shoot me a note, let me know. Yeah, that'd be the best way to do it.
So for those of you that are looking for Justin Hiatt, it's Justin, H-A-I-T-T, Hiatt at Workfront. And make sure when you reach out to him on LinkedIn that you say you heard him on the Selling with Social podcast. Send a personalized connection request. Please, salespeople, make sure you send us personalized connection requests. Justin, always great to have you on the podcast. And before you get off here, one last question for you, my friend, and that is all-time favorite movie. What is it?
Oh, that's a tough one. All-time favorite movie. The movie I watched the most growing up and I'll always can turn on and watch is Good Will Hunting for some reason.
Good Will Hunting?
Love it. Yeah, I watched it 20 times a year in college. It's just one of those, I'm bored, I'm going to throw in a movie and I can still watch it if it's on, or I just put it in, I can watch the whole thing. So
for some reason, I thought you were going to give me a Goonies or something.
No, I will watch the Goonies. I'm an 80s child, so all of that. Back to the Future, Goonies, Star Wars.
There's a social post going on, and someone wrote "wax on, wax off," and someone said, "What does that mean?" And I wrote, "Oh, you do not know."
movies will date you, and I've been a victim of that, especially 80s movies. But man, that was a good movie. Good movie time. 80s movies. That it
was. Listen, Justin, thanks so much for joining, and all of you listening in right now, stay tuned for this important message right now.
Thanks, Mario.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Selling with Social Sales podcast. Did you enjoy that show? If so, would you do me a huge favor and give the Selling with Social podcast a rating and review on iTunes? That would be super awesome. Also, if you want to easily find our show, just go to Vengreso.com. That's VENGRESO.com and click on podcast. From there, you'll find the Selling with Social podcast. Thanks for listening in. And until the next show, be awesome. Mario Martinez Jr. out. Don't forget to check out the AAISP's 11th Annual Sales Leadership Summit in Chicago, April 16th through the 18th. Visit aa-isp.org. Click Leadership Summit 2019 and use the code Vengreso 30%.